All right, our second presentation this morning will be given by Alan Karass. Alan Karass is Director of Libraries at New England Conservatory in Boston, Massachusetts. He's a graduate of Clark University, Simmons College, the University of Connecticut, and the Open University. Alan served as co-editor of Music Reference Services Quarterly from 2000 to 2007 and has written several articles for Serials Librarian, American Recorder, Music Reference Services Quarterly, the Music Library Association newsletter, and Boston Early Music News. He previously served NEMLA in numerous capacities, including newsletter editor from 1996 to 1999, and chair-elect, chair, past chair from 2000 to 2003. Alan's presentation is titled A Tale of Tunebooks, Black Bean Soup, and Lawyers, the Folk Song Society of Greater Boston and the New England Conservatory. Please welcome Alan Karass.
Thank you very much. Good morning. I'm going to try to go without using the mic. However, if you can't hear me, please do let me know, and I can go with the lapel mic or just talking to the mic. So I'm going to keep this fairly informal. I didn't want to do a written talk or do anything really formal. Just to sort of share with you what's been going on the last couple of years with the Folk Song Society of Greater Boston and New England Conservatory. So what I'm going to cover today is a little discussion of the Folk Song Society, FSGIB as it's known. The FSGIB Library, the Brunings collection, and Florence Brunings, who's really the personality at the center of the collection. The details of how this collection made it to NEC, and then just a couple slides on the lessons that we've learned in this whole process. And probably many of you have gone through similar donations and sort of legal battles, so these are probably things that you've learned already, but things I just wanted to share about the process. So a little bit of information about FSGIB. So there have been 3 dedicated members of FSGIB who've written really extensive histories of folk music in the greater Boston area. These are available. I'm happy to share them with you. They're just PDFs. So if you're interested, let me know. I can email them to you. So they're fairly good chronicles of the history of folk music in Boston, Cambridge, the greater Boston area from the 1930s onward. And it's sort of interesting that a lot of the activities happened at NEC, at Jordan Hall. But no one really knew in the society that Jordan Hall was part of NEC. So looking at the histories, it will talk about, or looking at letters, it'll talk about events that happened in Jordan Hall. And in parentheses, it'll say, well, we don't know if this is a standalone concert venue or if it belongs to someone. So people were very, very shocked to find out that actually Jordan Hall is NEC. So in addition, right around the corner is the Huntington Ave YMCA, and there are many events that happen there. And so starting in the 30s and 40s, there were informal and formal concerts that went on. And chronicled in some of these descriptions are discussions of formal concert series that happened at Jordan Hall and the YMCA, including repeated performances by Pete Seeger, Woody Guthrie, starting in the 50s. So a local folk music enthusiast by the name of Florence Brunings, whose name we're going to hear over and over again, issued a call to form the society on May 15, 1959. She wrote, quote, "The Folk Song Society of Greater Boston is being organized to bring together people of all ages, creeds, and colors who like to sing, play, listen to, and learn more about folk songs, and to offer the talent and facilities of the organization to the community." So luckily, she kept absolutely everything, and we actually have all of her letters. And once we get all of the collection, we're going to have everything in the NEC libraries. So the first president, Marcel Kiston, chose the name FSGIB because he felt it had a classy academic ring to it. It helped the organization flourish in Boston's college-rich environment. And indeed, many of the earliest events in the 1950s happened at Harvard, at NEC, at Northeastern, at many of the schools in the greater Boston area. The organization got off to a strong start, offering concerts, workshops, and performance opportunities. However, by 1965, it was starting to die out already. It had a really strong start, but for whatever reason, it started to fade away. So in 1969, Florence comes back, and she starts moving to revive the organization. And by the end of the year, she recruited a board, established a weekend workshop, and secured a concert space in Harvard's Elliott House. Since then, FizGib has thrived, sponsoring concerts, workshops, song swaps, midweek open sings. Additionally, they publish a monthly newsletter of events in the area and maintain a robust website. So once I got involved with this about 2 years ago, I've really been amazed at the vitality organization, that the membership list is quite extensive. They have a website. The amount of hours the volunteers and the members put in, it's just amazing. And quite often, individuals will have a number of roles. The person who facilitates the midweek sing also does countless other things. The loyalty is just incredible. So a bit about the library. So according to their folk letter from around 1980, the idea of an organizational library was discussed at a meeting in 1972. Shortly after that meeting, Bill Barker volunteered to be the FizGib librarian. He was then succeeded by Dan Watt, and in 1973, who is still active in the area. I spoke to him a couple weeks ago. Gilbert Glaubinger in 75, Mark Katz in 76, Fred Werson in 79, and Suzanne Rozek took over as librarian and moved into her home in 1983. As her home moved, the library moved. So in 1983, she was living in an apartment in Newton, and that's where it originally was. And then she bought a house in Roslindale. The whole collection moved with her. Her house in Roslindale also included a really nice cottage that was actually off the side of the property, but was deeded to the house. Her cottage, I got to see it when we went to collect the beginning of the collection. It was beautiful, and I would be happy to live in her cottage. It was lovely with a little kitchen area with a nice full bathroom. But for whatever reason, the way the zoning works in Roslindale, it cannot be held, it cannot be used as a permanent residence. So it can be a guest house. It can hold the library as it did up until recently. So she recently sold the house in Roslindale, and this cottage had to go with it. So that's part of the reason why there's an urgency to get the library to NEC. So as several bookstores in the area went out of business starting in the 70s, members bought songbooks and titles related to folk music. And in talking to some of the members who were around in the 50s and 60s, indeed they would go to the bookshops in Harvard and they would see that there'd be these large collections of folk tune books, of music about folk culture, and they were afraid that even back then these wouldn't be available. So they bought massive quantities of books, moved it to members' homes, and eventually moved it to the library. Over the years, a number of members have willed their personal collections to the library. Others have made purchases as donations to the library. There are still members that in their will have mentioned the FizGib library as a beneficiary for their library. So we know that more stuff is coming down the road. So originally members were required to leave a $1.50 deposit for every item they borrowed. The deposit would be refunded if the materials were returned on time. If not, if the librarian had to issue a reminder to return the materials, your deposit would be forwarded to FizGib. If the material was lost or damaged, the borrower had to replace it. And as I was told, this was very strictly adhered to. When longtime member Florence Bruning moved to a nursing home in the spring of 1985, she donated her index collection to the FizGib library, which really now is the core of the collection. So a little bit more about Florence Brunings. So she was born February 16, 1916 in Boston to Howard J. and Florence E. Brunings, the second eldest of 5 children. She lived in North Weymouth for most of her adult life and died May 23, 2003. Interestingly, very little is known about her personal life. So I've interviewed a number of people over the last month, people who thought they knew Florence really well. So when I actually sat down with them and said, tell me something about Florence, they knew nothing about Florence. They thought she had a job. They thought she was an administrative assistant for some place in North Weymouth. No one knew precisely where. No one knew anything about her family. I did some digging on Ancestry.com and found information about her family, but she never mentioned brothers or nieces or nephews or her parents. She never mentioned anything. However, everyone considered her a close personal friend. There are at least five or six people in FizGib who I talked to. They said, we loved her. She was fabulous. And then when I started to ask her, did she go to college someplace? People said, I don't know. She sent birthday cards and letters to people, for children, grandchildren, for birthdays, anniversaries, christening. She would send presents, but no one knew anything about her. And occasionally people would add little anecdotes about seeing her in concerts, and she was really wedded to the idea of the library. No one really knew if she was a singer or an instrumentalist or a dancer. So it's sort of fascinating that she moved in these circles, and she was warmly regarded by all the FizGib members, but no one knew anything about her. So she was actively involved in the folk song and dance communities in Boston, and faithfully attended the Folk Week at Pinewood Camp in Plymouth for decades. There are no photos of her at Pinewoods. It's very mysterious. She had an extensive personal library, and friends would often ask her if she had a copy of a particular tune. Out of frustration of not being able to find songs quickly, she decided to create her own index. So she went through her own collection, and over 10 years, she compiled the index by hand and included the titles and performers in the 1,115 books and journals and the 695 recordings in her collection. During the process, she often consulted with Joe Hickerson, the former head of the Archive of Folk Song at Library of Congress's American Folk Life Center. She worked tirelessly on the project and would bring books, index cards, and shoe boxes to concerts, in workshops, and continue to work on them. Most people have recollections of Florence, remember her sitting at concerts with her pen, her index cards, her boxes, and her books, creating an index to every single tune and every item she found. By the time she was done, she had 49,300 cards and 46 shoe boxes, all of which will be coming to NEC sometime this fall. So the index, which maybe many of you have in your libraries, looks like this. And it is a title-only index of everything in the collection. So we had this in the NEC library. We now have a second and third copy, courtesy of the FizGib library. So this was published by Garland in 1982. So the FizGib collection, what is in the collection now? So obviously the core of the collection is the Florence Brunings collection. There are tune books from North America and Europe, books on folk music, folklore, music history, mythology, instruments, and poetry, commercially made recordings as well as private recordings made by FizGib and its members, newsletters from FizGib and other organizations, folk music magazines, concert posters, and ephemera. So I brought a couple items just to sort of do show and tell of things that I thought were unique. So songs from the Cotton Fields, 1884, has been nicely bound at some point. Lumbering songs from the Northern Woods, Edith Falk. This is 1970. So we have English folk songs, Southern Appalachians. Probably everyone has this. The Cecil Sharp. The only thing that's slightly different is that this one is actually signed by Cecil. It's actually dedicated to his wife. And people in the society have very wide interests, as did Florence, and we have a collection of Bulgarian Macedonian folk music. And there's actually one more. There's one more really interesting book. I didn't notice it. Good. More rugby songs. Just in case. So, how and why did we get it? So, members of the FizGib Library Committee talked to several libraries in the Boston area, and I know there are at least 2 or 3 librarians in the room with whom they've had conversation with. They went around, they made the circuit, all of the libraries said no for a variety of reasons, and I can talk to you afterwards about why they all said no, and you probably know why they said no. So a committee member approached an NEC faculty member in the Contemporary Improvisation Department about the collection. So as you know, one of NEC's claims to fame is the third stream department that Rand Blake started many, many years ago, and that eventually sort of migrated into a contemporary improvisation program that is co-chaired by Hankus Netsky and Eden McAdam Summer. So members of the FizGib Library Committee knew the two of them and had a very, very preliminary discussion and said, would you be interested? Knowing that there's lots of Americana here, and Eden runs an American Roots ensemble within the CI department. So Eden was very excited, Hankus was excited, and Hankus invited me to have a discussion with the members of the Physics Library Committee. So the faculty were enthusiastic about it. So on April 17th, 2015, I was invited to the Physics Library Committee meeting. So we met at the chair's home in Central Square, and I thought it was going to be a quick, introduction. Is a 4-hour lunch. It's very yummy black bean soup, homemade bread, lots of desserts, and I got thoroughly interrogated. I thought it was going to be a very simple discussion. People asked me, the committee asked me about my background, where I got my library degree. They asked me about my ethnomusicological work. They asked about my career at NEC, which had been very short at that time, had been about 2 months. They asked about the library. They asked about CI. And finally, at the end of the 3rd hour, I got to ask a couple of questions about the collection. So I made it back to NEC that afternoon, and I got a very warm email from the committee saying, you know what, Alan? This might be the right home. We like you. We like what you have to say about NEC. Let's move forward. So we still talk about that black bean soup. It was very, very good. So we both felt it was a good connection, and because of the contemporary improvisation American Roots Ensemble and overall the CI faculty. So the donation of materials was accompanied by an endowed fund to support the collection. If you'd like to know more about this, I can talk to you about this afterwards. Essentially, a endowed fund was given to us. It is linked to the fund. So if for some reason, God forbid, NEC no longer is in existence and gets bought out or moved or just vaporized, the fund has to go with the collection. So it's an endowed fund that will yield about $5,000 a year for collection development, preservation, digitization, anything that we deem appropriate. It's very, very flexible. Plus, it'll pay for a project cataloger. So once we're settled in our new building later this summer, we'll be able to hire a project cataloger to catalog everything in the Physics collection. Of course, we have to get the rest of the collection first. We only have a portion of it now. The rest will come out of storage when we move into the new building. So as part of the agreement, an NEC Physics Library Committee was formed to oversee the relationship between the two organizations. This includes me, the library director, and the Physics Library Committee. So there are 2 members of Physics that have been involved in this. So timeline, I won't read through all of this, so it happened fairly quickly. First meeting was April 2015. We quickly got our advancement office involved, and we got the NEC lawyer involved, and Physics decided they needed a lawyer too. So we had 2 lawyers looking over the agreements. It was actually very helpful. The lawyer that Physics decided to use is an intellectual property copyright lawyer, and he himself is a folk singer. So he knew the repertoire. He also understood intellectual property. He understood copyright. I didn't need to sort of explain any of the issues. That was sort of a given. So really, any of the explaining that had to be done was with the NEC attorney rather than with the Physics attorney. But it all went very, very quickly. We had a signed agreement in March, and the first installment came May 2016. And there's the rest of it. So our open house for the new library, the new building will be, actually I got that wrong, it's September 14th. So you're all welcome to our open house on September 14th. Oh, I'm sorry, no, I got that wrong, that date is correct. So September 16th, we had an open house in the current library to celebrate the arrival of the Physics collection. Sorry about that, I misspoke. So yeah, so the first bit of the collection, the Bruning collection, arrived at NEC on September 16th, 2016. Our new building will open in August this year. The final installment of the Physics collection will hopefully arrive in October, and we'll be able to interview for project cataloger in November. So I know I'm almost out of time. So lessons learned. Talk to Peter Munstead about donors. Read his book about fundraising. Make sure you have a good attorney. Make sure you have an attorney who's also a musician. Ask your institution about donation policies, and if they have some previous agreements that you can sort of bring to the table quickly, we found that to be really, really helpful. The FSGIB people were really pleased that I could bring some sample agreements to the table and say, this is what it might look like when we're all done. I think that's it. I know I have just a couple minutes left. So any questions? Sure.
I don't suppose it's possible to get the recipe for that black bean soup, is it?
I probably can. I'll ask Ruth, and she'll probably be happy to share. Alan.
The endowed fund came from FSGIB or combined? Did you do fundraising?
It was complicated.
Okay.
So fundamentally, it came through FSGIB through lots of different channels. But that's an interesting point. One of the questions that we had to sort of discuss is what happens if there are other members who decide they want to give $25 here or $50 there. Normally at NEC, when an endowed fund is set up, it is set up, the money's put in, and then it's closed. And then there's a yield generated from that. So we had to make an exception in this case, so money can be added at any point in time. So NEC wasn't entirely thrilled with this because there's maintenance involved, there's bookkeeping involved if you have a little bit of money coming in. But we thought it was a really powerful goodwill gesture knowing that it's an open fund. People can give any denomination at any time. And it also is encouraging for members of FSGIB that if they want to have the library legacy continue and they want to think about, adding this to their will, $10,000, $20,000, they can. And there are people thinking about this, that this is a legacy, that NEC is an institution that will be around for a while, the library will be safe, and this is a nice relationship between a sort of a very vibrant organization in town and an academic institution. Zoe.
So is there still people performing from this library, and now will there be students performing from the library?
So during the initial open house last year, we actually had an open mic as part of this. So there were NEC students, there were FSGIB members. We actually got students from the CI department came, and actually the music making was just incredible. The FSGIB members were really thrilled that students were involved, and the students were really interested to be able to participate with the FSGIB members.
How many FSGIB members?
Oh, we had about 20 FSGIB members show up, and maybe about, 10 students from the CI department. And actually, CI faculty were there as well. Eden was there, Hankus was there, other faculty members were there. So it was good. So the idea is that this will be a living collection, it'll be a used collection. And part of what the endowment can be used for is actually a sort of a summer stipend, that if someone wants to come in, maybe a Simmons student, or if there's a student who's doing work in ethnography or folk music and wants to come in and they want to get a stipend to study the collection or to use materials from the collection, that they can come in during the summer, they can do scholar in residence, and their time would be funded. So that's still being negotiated as we speak, but part of the endowment is going to be used to make sure that it's not just a collection sitting on a shelf, but actually being performed. Does that answer your question, Zoe?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Michael?
Is the collection itself considered closed, or will FSGIB or its members be donating materials?
Yeah, it is an open collection. It will be growing, and part of the FSGIB NEC committee is to do collection development. It's always scary to do collection development by committee, but we all get along. And we can go back to Ruth's kitchen in Central Square and revive that black bean soup recipe and think about it. Actually, it's been very easy that we all send recommendations to one another, and from the fund we can buy new things. So, and indeed, FSGIB members will make donations. Yeah. Sarah.
Will it be circulating?
As of now, no. However, the thing we've talked about is that if we have numerous copies of things, and if someone desperately needs one of the second or third copies, and they need that to circulate, we can make provisions. One of the things that we're also discussing is whether or not things can go out on interlibrary loan. And as of now, the unofficial policy is that if it is a second or third copy, and that someone desperately needs it, that yes, it can go out. If it's only a copy in the country, that it can go out if it's a second or third copy. So, still under negotiation. Check back in a year. Anything else?
I'm just saying, if we're going to our collections, or if we have gifts and we feel that it would nicely belong in your collection?
Let us know.
Okay.
Yeah, we have, although we're moving into a new building in a couple
Right.
months, we still have a finite amount of space.
No, absolutely.
Yeah,
So
so,
we could keep them and then at some point contact you if you want to look
Yeah.
at them or send you them.
yeah, exactly. So, sure, hi.
Recordings, commercial recordings, or they kind of take performances?
So there are lots of commercial recordings. There are also some private recordings. And this was a sticking point, I know, with some of my colleagues in the room, is some people were afraid of the ramifications of accepting private recordings. So the policy that is part of the agreement is that private recordings are for in-house use only. So they can't leave. You know, a lot of them, we don't know what the performers are. You know, there are festival recordings going back to the early 50s. Tucked in there, I think there's some very early recordings of Bob Dylan, because he went to the Indian Neck Festival, and a lot of FISGIP members were active in that festival. So we don't know exactly what's there. We know there's some really interesting recordings, but those private recordings will be in-house use only. Anything else? I think we've run out of time. I'll be around all day if you have questions. Come and find me. Thank you very much.